Hey everybody, Mr. Weinland here. Getting ready to go over section 4 called The Growth of Monarchies. We've been kind of building up towards this moment where we start to see new kingdoms form in Europe, which ultimately will lead to what we know Europe to be. It takes several more years and centuries for to kind of see where Europe is today, the kind of countries we have. But over time, we do see they change, they grow, governments change, and a lot of this has to go back to the growth of the monarchies. We try to talk a little bit about this all the way back with Charlemagne and kind of the direction of this moment in this history. So let's kind of go through this. It won't take too long, but we're going to talk a lot about France and England and kind of talk about the importance of this. What we need to talk about with England around the time is that England is one of the first actual countries to develop an actual central monarchy, which is your answer number 18 is England. And we start to see that before the monarchy was under Anglo-Saxon rule. And we see that the Saxons were different tribes. They were Germanic tribes, and eventually they would kind of come together as the Anglo-Saxons and eventually grow this monarchy under the Normans. We see, they unified against the Normans, which then ultimately led to them to have a monarchy. But your answer 18 is England. Now, remember, you can always pause this video, write down the answers, and then go back and put it on Google Forms. And you can, pause, play to write down. So I'm going to do it as fast as I can just so I can kind of keep things moving. But Anglo-Saxon England, we see that the rulers, descendants of Angles and Saxons invaded in the 400s. We see most of the time that there were some divisions, some small kingdoms that grew out of this time. And so we see that, as I ignore that little message there, don't worry about it. But anyway, we see that these small separate kingdoms had their own laws, their own customs. They were very unique, very different in how they did things. We do see that the Danish Vikings did invade right around the 800s. We do see that we talked about the Vikings a little bit and how they've kind of caused problems over the years and how they're a bit of a menace. But we see that the Danish Vikings invaded and conquered Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Not all of England, but parts of it. We see in like 1878, the Viking campaign came short, got cut short due to Alfred the Great. And Alfred is your answer to number 22. So which king drove the Vikings north of London? That would be Alfred the Great. So because of this success, he was able to become the first king of Wessex in southern England, and we see that that was all due to his ability to drive the Vikings out. Now, we do see Alfred's descendants ruled England for most of the 2 centuries. We do see that in 1066, the king died without an heir. 2 men would claim the throne. There would be Harold of Anglo and Saxons, a nobleman from England. And then we see William, Duke of Normandy in France. Now we see, at one point England did have control of France. It's not like it is today. England or the UK, United Kingdom, is an island. Then France is its own little country in Europe. But at one point in time, England did have some land in France, which is ultimately going to cause some conflict over time. And part of the reason why, even going into after the American Revolution, you started seeing England and France having disputes. It's all due to land, and a lot of it has to go all the way back to this little dispute as well with William and Harold. But we see that supported by English nobility, Harold was named the new king. However, William was not happy about this, that he got passed over. So we see that he's going to take the crown himself, take it by force. He's going to get an army, and he's going to go into England, march in, and take Harold out. And with 2 armies fighting against each other in the Battle of Hastings, we see that William ends up winning. He ends up taking the throne, becoming King William I of England, known as William the Conqueror. Pretty cool name. I wish I had a name like that. I'm going to pull back on this one so you can kind of see the definition. Your first definition for section 4 is already up here on that slide. And so you can see here is that what William did is that after he becomes the king of Anglo-Saxon rulers, he starts to kind of claim all English personal property. That's mine. That's mine. I don't care if that's your own bed. That's mine. So he starts to lay out like, look, your property is my property because I am the king. And so he's dividing up land into fiefs for his Norman soldiers. We see that he's starting to create a form of loyalty to the king. And ultimately, what he ends up doing, how he does this by splitting up land, by dictating certain responsibilities, certain duties, is that he takes a big survey in England, kind of understanding what's out there, what land is out there, who owns what, who can pay taxes, just kind of knowing what's going on around England. And this is called the Domesday Book. And so that's your definition for Domesday, is took a survey in England, or a survey in England, what was owned and who could pay taxes, known as the Domesday Book. So if you need to pause and write that out, don't blame you. But we're going to move on to the next one. But the thing is that we do see a lot of times with a lot of kings is they want to expand, they want to grow, but the problem is they can't expand. There's limitations, and so in order to do that, you got to get more land. Well, how do you get more land? You got to go conquer it. And so we see that William is going to try and gain more power. Now, a lot of times, this isn't a case of economics of kings going out and trying to expand their land, but a lot of times it's just mostly out of pride, power. And we see that he's going into France to acquire new lands. Descendants inherited the position as Duke of Normandy. Great-grandson Henry II, also the son of French Duke. Henry was then inherited father's lands in France and became part of England. And we see that more land, more territories in France were added when Henry married a powerful French Duchess, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine, and together they ruled England and half of France. In theory, though, the French holdings made English kings and vassals of King of France. But we do know that in practice, kings of England were stronger in that of France and ignored a lot of their feudal obligations. Again, things get complicated, things get turned into a big problem. Now, the Magna Carta, here's the thing about the Magna Carta we're going to learn is that a lot of our democracy today in America all goes back to the Magna Carta. I know a lot of people are like, but Mr. Weinland, isn't even the Constitution and our government an experiment anyway? Like, how can you say it goes all the way back to Magna Carta? True in some aspects, yes. The founders of our country did kind of create their own form of government or form of democracy. But I would argue that a lot of those ideas for the Constitution date all the way back to the Magna Carta in 1200 in England. And this goes to the fact that the nobles felt like their rights had been taken away by the king. Now, look, they didn't have a whole lot of rights at the beginning. But the thing is, nobles own land, and land is important to them, and them owning their land, having control of their land, and when that gets jeopardized, that's going to cause problems. And so we see in 1215 these concerns were brought up to King John. John was caught in a war with France. This caused a lot of problems for England's French holdings, and so he's trying to get this war taken care of. He's trying to go get these lands, but he needs funding. Well, how do you do that? How do you support your soldiers, and how do you get them the resources that they need? Well, you tax the people. Well, you tax the nobles. Nobles didn't like this because they felt like they were paying for a war that they didn't want. And this is something that King John wanted. And so the nobles refused to pay it and took up arms against the king. And we see that they kind of led a small little rebellion. And we see that they went to John and they forced him to sign a document outlining what is now known as the Magna Carta. And so what the Magna Carta did was it restricted the king's power. Even the king, it said the king is not above the law. Yes, you are the king, the figurehead, the one we go to. Yes, you do make certain laws, certain rules, but you are not above the law. So the king had to obtain consent of the nobles before raising taxes, so getting some representation for the nobles. This ended the king's ability to arrest, punish people without cause, or take property legally. So we do see that this is the beginning of taxation without representation. No taxation without representation. So taxation with representation is what I meant to say. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. But the leading up to the American Revolution. But the Magna Carta addressed many other concerns. We do see that there are other things that the nobles were not satisfied with. They wanted more approval to raise, for the king to raise taxes, which they disapproved. We see by 1260, nobles began another rebellion to obtain say in how the kingdom was run this time, which would ultimately become the Parliament. We see Parliament, as you may know, was formed in England and is still there today. A lot of our legislation has certain aspects of Parliament. It's not exactly like if you've ever watched a Parliament meeting versus like legislators, or our federal legislators, or congressmen and women meeting. It's very different. The Parliament, it's a bit more chaotic. It's a little bit more free that anybody can talk. Whereas in ours, we have a little bit more of rules setting. But anyway, this Parliament allowed a little bit more representation for nobility, clergy, middle class to kind of discuss about the issues going on in their country and the governing body. So the Parliament had some powers, had the right to do a lot of different things, be able to kind of address. Edward I was one of the first kings to clarify the role of Parliament, worked effectively with governing the body, and the governing body that still makes a lot of the laws in that country today. We do see that in 1295 that the Parliament was summoned by Edward, including nobles, clergy, and representatives from the English county and town. They had the power to create new taxes, advise the king on lawmaking and royal policy. We do see Edward strengthen England's government, reforming the laws. Saw that Parliament as a tool of strengthening the monarchy and not limiting it. So he kind of worked with it and helping to improve the power of the king. We do see that that more changes would come, though, as I kind of fix this mistake here. We do see that some changes would come during the Middle Ages. We see that other kings, monarchies, especially throughout Europe, were trying to gain more power, even not just in England, but other parts of the world. So this became a bit of an issue at times. France, after Charlemagne, king of France, did not rule much of the territory, limited to the area of Paris and New Orleans, and rested in the hands of the powerful nobles. We see capitans. In the mid-900s, one noble family rose to power, and one member was elected king. Hugh Capet, successor, extended the power throughout France. And here's your definition for Hugh Capet. Basically, we see that this one individual rose to power. So you can pause and write the definition if you need to. We see power. Sometimes the capitans fought local nobles over power. Other times they create allegations, allegiances, my bad, allegiances, working with them. By 1300, ruled most of the modern day France. We do see as empire split. Emperor Charlemagne had unified Western Europe into one empire, but after his death, we see the split, which led to the western part becoming France and the other part, the eastern part, becoming Germany. So Germany, France remained somewhat unified under one king, where Germany had several small states with a ruler or a duke. 936, Otto the Great gained enough support to become king of the Germans. We talked a little bit about Otto the Great, and when we were talking about invaders, took down the Magyars. Worked to unite German lands. Otto did, conquering parts of northern Italy. In 962, aided Pope John the 12th, rewarded by being named Emperor of the Romans. Territories united under Otto became known as the Holy Roman Empire. Now, remember that Charlemagne did get crowned Emperor of Rome, but he wasn't the Holy Roman Empire. We're still the Franks, Kingdom of the Franks. The Holy Roman Empire, called holy because the empires had Pope's support, called Roman because of Charlemagne and had the title of Emperor of Roman people. So that's, again, what I just brought up. Your answer number 19 is right there. Who made decisions during this time? You had laws passed by the dukes. The dukes is your answer to number 19, maintain full authority over the land. So dukes is your answer to number 19. We do see that uh, we do see that in 1100, Holy Roman emperors did not inherit position; they were elected. We do see upon the death of the emperor, a group of electors, dukes, archbishops choose successor. We see that things would kind of change as they would crown. They'd be crowned by the Pope. Person chosen by the electors had to travel to Rome in order to do that, as the Pope would crown them and recognize them. So there was Germany and how it changed. We do see that Charlemagne's empire split to France and in the west and the eastern part Germany, and creating the Holy Roman Empire there, what is now Germany. Now we're going to get kind of quickly into Spain and Portugal. Now we talked a little bit about this, that the Muslims had come from the Middle East into North Africa up to Spain, and then they conquered pretty much all of that area in Spain and had that control. But up in the north part of Spain, we see that in the northern part of Spain that they would have basically a group of people from the old kingdoms or old empire where they had once controlled all of Spain and Portugal, and they were a Christian monarchy looking to take control. And so we see that this battle would rage on in the 700s. So we see that today the two countries share an Iberian Peninsula, which had been conquered by the Muslims in the early 700s. Muslims called the Moors by the Christians built powerful states centered in Cordoba. We talked about that and how tolerance in Cordoba, the science, the math that was being going on. But we do see that the northern Christian kingdoms are trying to take back Spain. So we see the fighting the Moors in 722. The Christian rulers began that fight with the Moors to drive them out of Europe. Christian rulers continued westward push, little success until 1000. So we see that they would kind of fight and they get pushed back, fight, push back, and then they kind of inch their way closer. And by the 1000s, we start to see that they were starting to make a big, huge dent. And civil war broke out between Muslim Spain, weakening the Moors' leadership. We see that tolerance, that idea of, we can accept the tolerance of the Moors. Not anymore. We do see that Christian states began a series of campaigns to retake the Iberian Peninsula called the Reconquista, which is your answer number 23. Reconquista, right there, if you want to write that down for number 23. In 1085, King of the Castile won the great victory over the Moors, inspired rulers of two other Christian kingdoms to join in the Reconquista. These victories ultimately helped rebuild the Iberian Peninsula, kicking out the Moors. And we see by the early 1100s, the Portuguese drove the Moors out in establishing also the Kingdom of Portugal. And then we ultimately see pushing south, rulers of Aragon, Castile continued and captured Cordoba in 1236. Christians pushed the Moors almost out of Spain within a few years of 1236. And then eventually by 1492, the Moors were driven out completely of the Iberian Peninsula. And in this date right here, 1492, is important, which we're going to talk about more in when we talk about chapter 16, I believe, about the age of exploration, because in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Even though Columbus was Italian, he got financial support to basically go and sail across the Atlantic, thanks to the Moors being pushed out during the Reconquista. So anyway, that ultimately opened the doors for a lot of exploring. Here's your answer number 21 in this point right here, and the last point. So you might want to write those down for number 21. When the rulers of Aragon and Castile married, they what? So we see modern Spain origins as late in 1400s. The royal marriage between the rulers of Aragon and Castile united the two kingdoms, combining countries and power. They ruled one of the strongest countries in Europe. So you want to pause here and finish writing it down. But that's pretty much going to do it. But I will say here on the Spain aspect, by kicking out the Moors, it opens up the door for Spain to try and rebuild this big, huge, massive empire and go explore. They have new money, and they are going to use that money. And we're going to learn more about that in the Age of Exploration with Columbus. Real quick before I go, I have a really funny clip from Seinfeld. This is really funny. This is one of my favorite clips, the Bubble Boy. in this George Costanza right here plays the Bubble Boy in a game of Trivial Pursuit, and guess what one of his questions was? So I'm going to play it real quick. It's pretty funny. I thought I'd share it.
Okay, history. This is for the game. How you doing over there? Not too good.
All right, Bubble Boy. Let's just play. Who invaded Spain in the 8th century?
That's a joke. The Moors.
Oh, no. I'm so sorry, it's the Moops. The correct answer is the Moops.
Moops. Let me see that. That's not Moops, you jerk. It's Moors. It's a misprint.
I'm sorry, the card says Moops.
It doesn't matter. It's Moors. There's no Moops.
It's Moops.
Moors.
Moops.
Moors. There's no Moops, you idiot.
Stop it! Let go of him! Donald! Stop it! Now let go of him, Donald.
I'm gonna kill him.
Stop.
Moors. Say Moors.
Oh, no. Donald, stop it.
Uh-oh, poor Bubble Boy. Yeah, so now you know it's the Moors, it's not the Moops. Seinfeld kind of made that famous, and so now you know. Now you know. So if anybody says it was the Moops, no, it was the Moors. All right, that's going to do it for the lesson. Guys, again, email me if you need to. Email me at weinlandp@mannford.k12.ok.us. Email me, let me know if you still need me to send any more packets or anything, or having trouble, just anything you need me to do, just let me know. I'll do my best, and I'll get back with you when I can. All right, have a good one, guys. Stay safe. Stay indoors.